All right. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number, I think it's 244. Something akin to that. So, today, it is time to draw steel. Anyone that doesn't know, earlier this year, I think around January or something like that, there was a Kickstarter for a new RPG called the MCDM RPG. If you don't know what the letters MCDM stand for, that's Matt Colville DM. Matt Colville is, I don't know, a relatively well-known name in the tabletop RPG space. He has a YouTube channel where he talks a lot about tabletop RPGs, specifically from a DM perspective. And yeah, he's a guy that I have had one-sided arguments with because he doesn't know that I exist. But I have had strong opinions on some of the things that he has said. However, he announced that he was making his own RPG. Actually, he mentioned it during the whole OGL debacle, where everyone's like, you should make your own RPG to screw over Wizards of the Coast. And he's like, well, we're not doing it to screw over Wizards of the Coast because I like them, but I am already making my own RPG. And everyone's like, yes, something that's going to topple Wizards of the Coast. And it's not, because it's not intended to. If you watched the D&D Direct, you would have seen one of the official partners on D&D Beyond is MCDM. He's still going to be making D&D 5.5 content, guys. However, a little while ago on Twitter, I think, somebody on the design team for the MCDM RPG made a post mentioning that they'd chosen a name, and it is called Draw Steel, which is a cool name. And at that point, from what I had seen of the RPG, which there were previews and stuff on the Kickstarter page and stuff like that, Draw Steel felt like a really good name for it. Well, people that backed it, myself included, have gotten the first taste of the system. And I've got to say, I've read through the rules once, very, very quickly, and I have glanced through the bestiary that came with it, and oh boy, I'm excited. It's going to take me a few reads to get through it. And this is something, like, they actually bring it up in the Backer Kit post, and I didn't realize how essential it was until they brought it up. The backer preview, whatever you want to call it, the first backer playtest package, we can call it that, I guess, has no artwork and has an extremely bare bones layout. Effectively, it's 8.5 by 11 sheets with 2 columns, which is really common. Like, if you look at any tabletop RPG book, that is kind of the default for tabletop RPG rulebooks, is you use standard letter format, and you use 2 columns on the page. So it's not like it's that bizarre, but beyond that, there's really very, very little layout work on purpose. Like, they're when the book actually comes out, it will have a really nice layout and artwork and things like that. But this is a playtest package. Like, it's just meant to get the information out there. And layout in and of itself massively can affect comprehension. And I've mentioned before, like in a couple of my Essence 20 reviews, where they've made some layout choices that I didn't agree with, that I thought made it significantly more confusing to read. And so I kind of understand and have understood for a while that layout decisions can be important. But I guess I just didn't realize how much of a different experience something is when it is fully laid out in a really, really good way versus just information on a page. And again, Matt Colville's team addresses this in their update where they talk about this. They go, "Hey, we totally understand not having art and not having like a real layout can be the difference between you understanding what this is and not understanding, and that's perfectly fine. Just because you backed it doesn't mean that you have to do this playtest. If you want to wait until we have a much more finalized layout, go ahead and do that. This particular thing is not meant for consumer consumption. It's meant for playtesting." And so I found that absolutely fascinating, that it is a perfect example. If you are thinking about getting into creating content for tabletop RPGs, learn how layouts work. And it could be as simple as just looking at a bunch of different tabletop RPGs, like getting core books or supplements and things like that, and figuring out which ones for you just felt the easiest to understand, and mimicking their layout. I would never say to copy anything, but take examples from the pros and understand that certain layouts are just going to be more beneficial. The other thing that you have to understand is just because a layout speaks to you does not mean that it is universal. Really weird kind of sidetrack. Back in the, I want to say it was like the late 80s, but it might have been even earlier. It might have been the 70s and 60s. For a long time, psychologists in general have been studying learning and how people learn. And the practical application is put into practice in education all around the world. And forever ago, I can't remember when this became a thing, but they introduced the idea of learning styles. And there were 3 distinct learning styles. There was visual learning, there's auditory or oral learning, and oral not meaning O-R-A-L, aural, I guess would be the correct pronunciation. Aural learning, A-U-R-A-L, meaning auditory. And the third one was called kinesthetic, which basically meant interacting with something or doing something to learn. And for a while, it was very, very common practice to test students to see which one of these 3 learning styles they fell into. It's like, are you a visual learner? Are you an aural learner? Or are you a kinesthetic learner? And the kind of accepted practice of this is that visual learners have to learn visually. They won't learn from listening to something. Same thing with aural learners. Aural learners, they need to be able to hear something. They can't just learn by looking at something. Kinesthetic learners have to have something that allows them to interact with it. And if you don't do that, then those students won't learn. And that was the prevailing theory for decades. And more recently, I want to say, I think in the past like 10 or 15 years, maybe going back as far as 20 years, they started realizing that students don't learn in one way. People don't learn in one way. The idea of visual learning versus aural learning versus kinesthetic learning is a real thing. That's where all of the science came from. That's where all the studies came from. However, nobody learns in a single way. There are just certain learning styles that people tend to understand and just click with better. That's why the practical applications that a lot of times most teachers did was, instead of separating their classes into 3 different groups where one got oral education, one got visual education, one got kinesthetic education, what they would do is they would ensure that anytime they were teaching something, they would have a visual implement to it, they would have an aural implement to it, and they would have a kinesthetic implement or aspect to it, so that it didn't matter what learning group you were in, there would be something for you. And because of that, due to a little bit of false causation fallacy, they thought, yeah, this proves that this is a real thing, when in all actuality, it's just the fact that there are certain ways that some people just pick up things a little bit better, but it doesn't mean that they can't learn another way. Like someone that is primarily a visual learner doesn't mean that if you give them a project that requires a more kinesthetic approach to it, that they physically are incapable of doing that. The same thing is true about an oral learner. It's not that oral learners can't learn something from reading. However, they retain the information better if they can hear it while they're reading it. Things like that. And so that's been becoming the more accepted theory now, is the idea of there aren't really visual learners or oral learners or kinesthetic learners. They're just people that prefer one type of learning over another, or just click with one type of learning over another. But everyone can learn every single way. It's just certain ways will be more difficult for some students. And the end result is still, whenever you're teaching something, teach with multiple learning styles built into it. So that being said, going back to the idea of layouts, just because a layout works for you does not mean it is the most effective layout. It may just be the one that clicks with your particular learning style. So again, look around and see what are the more common learning styles, and specifically look to see if the big names in a particular genre all tend to use this same layout style, because it could be that the reason that those are big names is because they have a good marketing department, or it could be that the reason that those are big names is because they're the ones that are easiest to understand, and therefore people pick them up quicker. Now, the ability to figure out which one of those things, you can't do that. It would take seriously hundreds of hours of research and study and all these other things to figure out exactly why it is this one is more popular and which factor influenced this much. Like maybe it was 20% marketing, 10% layout, and 50% people just really like Dungeons and Dragons. But there's something to be said about learning how to do a proper layout if you want to. And this is not just if you're creating your own tabletop RPG. If you are creating supplements, like again, I've created 2 different classes for D&D 5th edition. So understanding layouts was useful because I could I 100% just did what the player's handbook does, because that's what I was supposed to do. And it worked very, very well. Most people that tried my class really didn't have a ton of issues understanding the basics of the class, because people would comment on the page and tell me. And normally it was just if I had written something vague or had misstated something in the text. But actually understanding what was going on, most people didn't have too bad an issue. So anyway, so I got really, really into the idea of layout design. Overall, I'm liking the MCDM RPG, or Draw Steel as it's now called, and I like the name too. The system itself uses a 2d10 system, so you roll 2d10 and then add the results together. So it's not a D100 system where one die is the 1 space and 1 die is the 10 space. No, you roll 2d10 and then add them together. And you the basics of it, you basically have 3 different things that can happen. You could have a tier 1 success, a tier 2 success, or a tier 3 success. And a tier 1 success is anything below an 11, I think. Or an 11 or below, or something like that. It involves the number 11. Tier 2 starts at 12. Tier 3 starts higher than that. And so I actually I have a website that I've bookmarked now that will show me the distribution of probability of rolling any collection of dice, so I can figure out, what's the average roll on that. For 2d10, the most common roll you are going to make is an 11. And rolling an 11 or higher on 2d10 is going to happen about 55% of the time. So because you can't roll a 1 or a 0 on 2d10, it means that the statistical distribution is a little bit higher. And so, yeah, your average roll is an 11, followed by 10 and 12 are your second most common thing. And you'll roll 11 about 10% of the time. And then everything away from 11 is 1% did a difference. So rolling a 12, that'll happen 9% of the time. Rolling a 13 would be 8% of the time, et cetera, et cetera. And it works the same way. Rolling a 10 is 9% of the time. Rolling a 9 is 8% of the time. Things like that. So the fact that the worst that you can do, you have roughly about a 50%-ish chance of having the better than average result, or the tier 2 result, is interesting. The other thing, you can't miss in draw steel as far as attacks are concerned. Even if you get a tier 1 result, you still do damage, you still do something. It's just generally not as much or as useful, which again I find fascinating. And included with the playtest packet, they have 5 character classes and then a shit ton of other stuff. They have careers, which are effectively backgrounds from D&D 5th edition, and then your ancestries, your race, and they have, I think, close to a dozen of those. And then the other thing that's really cool is they also have these things called kits, which is basically your weapons and armor. And it's really interesting. I need to reread it again, but as far as I can tell, and again, I might be wrong about this because I've read it exactly once, and I skimmed through a lot of it. It seems that any class can use any kit. So the kits themselves are broken down into martial and magic. And it's basically things like the martial artist kit means that you wear no armor and you punch things. So you can use unarmed strikes. But the kit itself will come with a signature ability, and it'll affect like armor values and attack rolls and damage and stuff like that. So theoretically, if you wanted to, you could choose the conduit, which is kind of their version of a cleric, but not really. And then give them the martial artist kit to kind of give yourself like a holy monk style character. Or you could choose the whirlwind kit and kind of create a Belmont style vampire hunter that uses a whip and has holy magic at their side. Stuff like that. So it seems really, really interesting, and I'm eager to play around with it. And again, you can also there's also magic kits, which basically give you a standard kind of magic spell attack and that you use in kind of a default style magic. So in the same vein, you could choose their tactician, which is kind of their version of a fighter, and then give them a magic kit, and they would be kind of similar to an Eldritch Knight or a Sword Mage kind of the thing. So, like I said, it's fascinating. I'm interested. They include two adventures. They have an intro adventure and then one that's designed as a sequel to the intro adventure. And they both look like D&D Adventures League adventures. Like, hands down, they took that layout, which is an extremely effective layout. Let me tell you. So I like that. And then I looked at the bestiary. The bestiary straight out of 4th edition. Like, I cannot tell you how excited I was to see monster types where you have artillery and controllers and stuff like that, so that when you're building encounters, instead of just going, well, I'm going to use devils over here, and then I'm going to put a big snake there, you can go, well, I really would like to have a couple artillery monsters that'll hang in the back, and then a big tank kind of monster here, and then a controller monster over here, and that's how I'm going to create this encounter to make it dynamic and interesting. It's one of the best things that 4th edition ever did, was give monsters types. And Colville has brought that back in spades. It looks so good, guys. I just genuinely, it looks amazing. So yeah, overall, I am thrilled with Draw Steel. I'm interested to see where it goes. Um, if it wasn't for the fact that I have so many other things going on right now with the Visions of Mana playthrough, uh, and my Essential Essence 20 series that I just got started again with Transformers, I would want to do a Discovering New Dragons and Designing New Dragons about Draw Steel, because I am kind of excited. But again, this is the first playtest packet. Things are going to change. Right now, all of the classes that are in there only go to level 1. So there's enough there to start playing the game, but there's not enough there to run a campaign or anything like that. So yeah, interested to hear what you guys are thinking. Are you guys interested in Draw Steel when it does inevitably come out? Is that, would you like me to do in-depth reviews of Draw Steel books and stuff like that, or even an Essential Essence 20 style series once I finish getting at least the 3 core books for Essence 20 out? And would you like me to cover more stuff specifically about Draw Steel? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today. I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.